Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Tonight I have two things to unbox. So the first is, like I said last week on stream, it was my birthday last week, and so I did a little bit of birthday shopping. Normally I get to go to Stitches and do most of my birthday shopping there. But that was canceled this year, and Wisconsin Sheep and Wool is also either I think all of the vending is fully canceled on that, but they're still gonna let people show sheep in some fashion. I'm not totally sure what the details on that, but I won't be going there to do any yarn shopping. So I did some online shopping. And so I have some sock obsession yarns to unbox. I've bought a couple of those before and unboxed them and shared with you guys. So I bought some more from them. And then I also have a Leither box that was in the mailbox on my way in the house this afternoon. So I'm going to open that up as well. For those of you new to the stream, the Leither is a subscription that I subscribe to. It's a crochet box and it comes with a number of things. And so I'll start by opening that up. Welcome to everybody watching the stream. If you have questions that are related to the stuff that I'm opening or to totally other things, yarn and crochet and whatever, please feel free to throw those in the live chat and we will talk about them. Stephanie's saying hello, welcome back. Thanks for coming back after finishing your PhD. And congratulations on that. Jane is saying happy belated birthday because she missed the stream last week. Thank you very much. And Catcraft says hi. So welcome everybody. I'm gonna open this guy up. This is my Leither box. So this is, like I said, a subscription that I pay for, and I just like to get the surprise yarn and things that come in this box. I just think it's fun. So I'll get this opened up. Comes all nicely packaged here. All right. So every month's yarn is a total surprise, which I find kind of fun. This month is called Neapolitan. It is a worsted weight yarn. It's 100% superwash merino. It's 218 yards or for 100 grams. And you can see pretty clearly why it's called Neapolitan. It's got a nice chocolatey brown and very natural vanilla white, and then little stripes of pink in here. Let's see if I can get those. There we go, on camera. So very Neapolitan ice cream colors. Let's see. The thing that I love about the Leither boxes are the hooks. So they are hand turned. Not that I don't love the yarn, but the hooks I think are really fun and just kind of cool to collect and whatnot. So they are hand turned wooden handles, and then the hook portion at the top is a clover hook. So Clover Amour hooks are my favorite, and so these are kind of a combination of my favorite hook and a really cool hand-turned handle. So this is an H hook this month. I think I'm 9 out of 10 of the hooks in the set. I think this is the 9th month in a row that they've done the clover hooks in the inlays. I've got a couple of hooks from before then. I've probably been subscribing about a year now. Let's see. Twine Twiddler says that she's watching trying to frog several rows of a bulky roving yarn with tons of halo. That is a pretty difficult task. So hopefully it goes pretty well for you. But I don't even have any suggestions there. Sometimes that's just, you just got to take it really slow and pick all those little knots out. All right, so along with the yarn and the hook, there's always some little surprise that goes with them. Generally, there's stitch markers or pins or little things like that. I got a pair of scissors once, and this is a little ice cream cone. And the ice cream cone obviously goes with the Neapolitan theme there, so it's probably an ice cream type of theme month. So it's just a cute little stitch marker. And the nice thing about these stitch markers is that they are crochet stitch markers, so they open up because this is a crochet subscription box. So a lot of times when there's little subscription boxes and the little giveaways are those round rings that are useful for knitting but don't work for crochet. So a couple more people. Oh, Stephanie said thank you and happy birthday. Thank you. And Val said hello. So hi, Val. All right. So this is the ice cream collection. Like I said, I was assuming that's where the theme was going. And let me get to the page that doesn't reveal the pattern, so I don't give any. Yeah, on the little. You still can access them on the internet, but at least I think. Oh, it actually looks like. So I'm reading the other side while we're trying to show the patterns here, and it looks like there is, in addition to being able to. Let's see. How do I want to see? Okay, so it looks like along with this, she's also now doing lessons in how to actually complete the patterns. So it looks like there's a website you go to, you put in a coupon code that comes in the book with your monthly subscription, and then it looks like you get to do the course for free. So it looks like in addition to having a written pattern in here, which I'm not going to show, there is also video tutorials now. So that's a new addition. So each month you get the choice between, when you subscribe, you get the choice between wool yarn or cotton yarns. And then you can choose kind of your level of subscription. So I get the deluxe box, which includes the hook, the pattern, the yarn, and the little gift. You can get just a hook. You can get just the yarn, I think. I think you can get just the clover hook. There's a whole bunch of different options. So, and then there are 2 patterns that are included. One that features the cotton yarn, one that features the wool yarn, but presumably are interchangeable since they use the same hook style. And the yarns don't always match. Sometimes they're themed very closely, and sometimes they're pretty different. So this month it looks like a cup cozy and fingerless gloves. And if I was betting, you probably can get all 3 items out of one ball. Because fingerless gloves don't generally take up much more than 50 grams, and I would bet this cup cozy doesn't take much more than 50 grams. So 50 grams total on fingerless gloves, and then this is probably another 25 to 30 grams of yarn. So there's probably enough in here to do both projects, if I was guessing. So that is my Leither Coast subscription box for the month. So that is pretty nice. Actually really like soft, squishy yarn. I really like it. So we will see. I'm going to add this up to my hook collection. Really, really smooth, very knobbly style hook handle this time. Sometimes they're more like sharp, I guess. I don't really know what the feature is, but they flare in and out. This one's very bumpy, but it feels nice in the hand. So it's pretty comfortable to hold on to. The thing that I like about them is a lot of times I get really, really tight hand when I'm crocheting. Like I'll squeeze down on my hook really far and my pinky will get really sore. And so this one kind of forces my hand to stay a little bit more open. Stephanie's asking, she wants to try subbing to the box and asked if I have a referral link. I can look around and see if I've got one. I'm not sure, actually. But if I do, I will message it to you. And Val, is asking if I think the yarns are good, and she also wished me happy birthday, so thank you for that. I'll be real honest with you. I haven't really worked with them all that much. They've always seemed very nice when I've handled them. They're very soft. The yarns are well dyed and pretty colors. The patterns are always really cute. But I really just, well, one, I just haven't been into, I guess not that I haven't been into them. I just have been really into the amigurumi. So I've liked a lot of the patterns that have come through, but for whatever reason, that's just what I'm focused on right now. That's what's on my list of things that I want to do. And I kind of just like collecting them. So they do seem like very nice yarn. They're very soft. This one in particular has got a really nice squish to it. If you kind of look around on a few of my videos, you'll see there's a couple of them where I've pulled them back out and shown a bunch of them. They've all seemed very, very nice. But being totally honest, haven't worked much with the yarn. The hooks, on the other hand, I have worked with. They're all very nice. My possible only complaint is that because they're seated in here, the shaft on them is just a little bit shorter than it is in the ergonomic covers, like the silicone grips on the hook. So if it matters to you, the shaft portion where you size your yarn is just a little bit shorter than normal on the clover hooks. It's probably my only real complaint. The other complaint is really just that I'm not used to the hooks, and so I find it takes me a little bit longer to crochet, but that's not really a fault of the hook. It's just muscle memory. You know what I mean? Like, you get going and you can move your hand very quickly with your normal hooks, and when you change that a little bit, it's just a little bit awkward. But that's not a fault of the hook. That's just, if I use them more, I would get more used to them. Catcraft's asking, she's interested in an advent club. What yarn would I recommend? Sock DK, etc. That really depends on what you're looking for exactly. So if you are looking for, there's a couple of different ways I've seen these advent type things run. So one is all of the yarns go into making a single project. And you're supposed to like open the little door in the morning and work up that whole thing kind of that day, so that by Christmas you end up with a completed project. In that case, a heavier yarn, like if you actually want to do it that way and try and keep on track, a heavier yarn would theoretically work up faster. And so you might actually be able to keep on target with that, even though, it's going to be busy and holidays and whatnot. I've seen some where it's just a different yarn every day and they don't all necessarily play into the same project. Honestly, if I do anything like that, if I were to do anything like that, I would probably pick sock yarn, but I always default to sock yarn. So it's kind of hard for me to not be biased towards sock yarn always. I have had a little bit of trouble finding those advent type clubs that have both a knitting and a crochet pattern. They tend to be knitting heavy, and so I haven't really participated in them. They're often pretty expensive too, and they're a lot of times they're like little bits of yarn. You know what I mean? It's 20 grams or 10 grams each day to make a big project, and I've never been a huge fan of the de-stash type of look, where if you're making a shawl and you've got 25 days of 10 grams of yarn, it's going to be a 250 gram shawl, but it's like a row or two of a color. And that's just never really been my style. I don't have anything against anyone who does like it, but it's it's just it's not for me with it's too much color and too much chaos. Um, so I've always tended not towards those types of clubs. One of these days I'm sure I will find one that really draws me in. I would consider maybe one that uh does like I've said before, I kind of want to do a blanket that's made of squares. And so, like, maybe one that does 25 squares to make a 5 by 5 something. Um, you know what I mean? Like a table runner or a small throw or something like that that does like squares out of each of the ones or something like that. I'm trying to think of what would tempt me into doing one of the Advent type things. I've also seen them for non winter holidays. So I've seen like a spring box, and I've also actually Leither Co. runs a 13 Days of Halloween one. So there are some non-Christmas options in some cases. And usually the Advent ones aren't Christmas themed, I've found, because by the time you get them all open, it's Christmas and then Christmas is over. And so you sort of want your Christmas themed stuff done by like December 1st. So usually they're not actually Christmas themed in most cases, but the what I find is a lot of people have a lot less money around Christmas because it's earmarked for presents and gifts and things for other people. And so the reason I bring up the alternate boxes is that if money were a little bit easier around you know, in the spring or in the fall, it might be an option for some people who want to do that, but it hasn't worked out around Christmas time. So, anyway, I guess the end result of that question is I would go with what you like the most. They're not real cheap in a lot of cases, and so the thing that draws you in most is probably what you should pick. But I guess if you're asking me, I would choose sock because that's what I always choose. And along those lines, I'm going to open up my sock obsession yarns, which are all sock weight yarns. Sock obsession does have some yarns occasionally that are not sock weight. They're few and far between, but they do exist. And I'm going to open this up and hopefully not cut any yarn. Okay, this is covers. Always makes me nervous to run a pair of scissors across. All right. That is my packing slip. I'll set that aside. All right, I'm super excited. I haven't seen these in person. Well, like, obviously, I just opened them, and they're really cool. All right, so I think these are all on different bases, or most of them are on different bases. This one is called Hotter Cousin. It is a 75-25 superwash merino. So 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. It's a 4-ply sock or fingering weight yarn, 100 grams, 463 yards. And it is kind of like a vanilla-y, how would you describe this? Like sand colored, getting lighter. There's lighter and darker spots. So there's real natural colored yarn here.
I would describe it as mop-like.
Mop-like, okay. So my husband says it's like mop colored. So this is natural colored yarn here. There's kind of like a tan sand color here, and it gets darker into a dirty mop water color here. It's a very pretty dirty mop water. And then there are highlights of all kinds of rainbow colors in here. Some hot pink, orange, yellow, teal, green. The speckles change. I'm going to untwist this. It's beautifully twisted, but I want to see what it looks like laid out. So there is that, and we'll have to readjust the camera because I moved a whole bunch of things around. Okay. Okay. There's some really cool colors in here. So hopefully you're watching on a monitor, you can see these show up really well. But sorry. Hopefully you're watching on a monitor that will show them up really well or show them off really well. You're obviously watching on some sort of monitor. But yeah, there's all these really like just really bright spots. Turn this around, you can see all the different colors like tucked in here. Very, very happy with this one. So some purple in here. I think it's gonna work up cool. It's very like marbly. It should work up really nicely. So. All right, let's see.
Yeah, but I'm the one who has to do all the color coordination and everything.
Yeah. Mop colored. So, yeah, my it is funny what he was saying is he's the one who does all the color coordination. So the reason we started this just a little bit late tonight was because we were trying to match the colors between the cameras dead on, and that was
I more meant you come to me for projects and ask which of these yarns goes with which.
yeah. So he's actually a little bit color obsessed, but maybe not naming the naming the colors. But yeah, my husband also does help a ton in like picking which colors I put together in projects and making suggestions. So it is a little bit funny. This one's also mop colored. If apparently that was what I was in the mood for when I was shopping. This one is called Driftwood. It's 100% merino. Also 4-ply sock fingering weight, 100 grams, 438 yards. So this one's 100% merino. This one had 25% nylon in it. And this one is pretty consistently sand colored. There's little darker spots and slightly lighter spots, but I don't think it goes to natural anywhere except the bright sections. None of the more solid tans go to neutral or natural colored. So there's a lot of this like dark purpley brown in here. Hold on, we'll refocus once I stop moving around. So there's a lot of this like dark purpley brown in here. There's little highlights of orange and blue. There's a little bit of green, but it's mostly where the orange and blue touch. Looks like there's like a little bit of like the orange being a little bit yellow and the blue mixing together and making a couple of like greenish spots. But very, very like earthy, pretty natural colors. So I like that one quite a bit. I think it photographed maybe just a little bit browner. It's I think a little bit lighter than I was expecting, though I might be misremembering. And I like that the brown sections, like the speckly brown sections, are just a little bit purple. All right. Go with this one. All right. This one is called Don't Forget Your Broom. It's 100% superwash merino, 100 grams. It's sock fingering weight, but this one, instead of being a 4-ply, is a single ply. It's 400 yards. And this one is all dark jewel fall earth tone kind of colors. So there it is untwisted. I'll kind of squish it back together so you can see all the colors. But there's a really pretty dark, like mauve purple that gets almost to black. And then some sections of kind of a purpley gold. It's where these two colors are kind of overlapping and blending together. Some really nice amber tones, I guess. Gold amber tones. And then there's this nice blue section in here, but I really like this color, this like pewter color between the gold section and the blue section. There's this like steely gray blue in here. Um, and then this side has sort of a blue gold color um, that also has kind of a green hue to it as well. So really pretty fall colors. If I can work quickly, I could get this made into something that I can wear for the fall. Um, Single ply yarns are not trivial to work with, though. As was it Twine Twiddler up above was pulling apart roving yarn? Yeah. Roving is a single ply. Hers is a lot heavier, but anytime you don't have plied yarns, it's really easy to pull them apart, which makes for a basically you can't make mistakes. Is the goal anytime you work with a single ply yarn. Let's see. Val loves the speckled yarns. Anyone else annoyed that if it's not fuzzy? Sorry, I'm reading here labeled. All right. So is anyone else annoyed that if it's not fuzzy, it's labeled fingering, but as soon as it's fuzzy, the yarn is called a 4 or 5. It's still thin, just fuzzy. So I think it has. I think I know what you're getting at there. Even like even like some of the chenille yarns, they're very like the core of them is very very fine, and the fuzz around it has more to do with how it works up in like a gauge, and a little bit to do with coverage, but yeah, I know what you mean. I've handled a lot of yarns where I'm like, ooh, that yarn is way too thin for what they're calling it. Shawl in a Ball comes to mind. I think they sell Shawl in a Ball as either a DK or a worsted weight yarn, and it works up very very much like a fingering yarn. But it has just a boatload of halo. Um,
The number 4 medium.
Shawl in a Ball is sold as a 4. Yeah, so that's a good example of one that's very thin. Um, but yeah, it doesn't have uh it it's not very thick yarn. So let's see. She also asked if I make socks. Uh what do I use the yarns for? So mostly what I use fingering weight yarns for are shawls. So I I really like making 100 gram 100 gram like lacy shawls. That's really what I make mostly out of these. I've made fingerless gloves. I don't think I've ever made a hat out of fingering weight yarn, but I don't generally make socks. I don't knit, and I've never actually tried crocheted socks, but crochet stitches never feel like they're the right kind of thing for socks. It feels like you'd be walking on lots of little knots. Where like knit stitches loop through each other, but they don't ever like make kind of a ball. So, um, yeah, that's what I mostly do with that. And actually, if we're being perfectly honest, mostly what I do is collect it.
Well,
I do make a ton of shawls, but more of it is just because it's really pretty to look at, and I really having having selection on hand. That if I find the perfect pattern, that I've got a yarn that will be perfect for it. Um, all right. What else do I have here? This yarn is actually the reason that I put an order in. I kept seeing this being posted, and this is the one that I was after, I guess. This one's called Snow Peas. It's 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. It's a 2-ply yarn. It's 100 grams and 400 yards. This is a really, really like high twist yarn. You might even be able to see the plies in here. I absolutely love that when you could see the plies in the yarn. I don't know why I like it so much. It doesn't really show through in the final product, but it just always draws me in when I can like really see these kind of chunky looking plies that are really twisted together. So, this one is kind of a little streaks of natural yarn showing through, but there's a lot of this really pretty like sky blue, some silver gray in here, and then little speckles and streaks of purple, a small amount of pink, a small amount of what appears to be black but might just be really saturated purple. It's a little bit hard to tell. And then there's just a little tiny bit of like a teal mixed in here. I don't know if that's shows through much there, but there's a little tiny bit of it here and there. There's a couple of these little teal speckles in here, a little bit more of the magenta-y pink in there. So yeah, that one was the one I was after, and this one was Snow Peas, and I am really happy with that one. It's really pretty. It's gonna make a very pretty, maybe cowl. It has very a wintry feel, and a lot of times in the winter I like a cowl. Not that I don't like shawls all winter too, but this one is called Milky Way. It's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. It's a 4-ply yarn, 100 grams, 463 yards. This is, I think, the same base as this first one. And this one is... So there's a yarn that I've bought a couple of times. I know I've shown it on here. It's made by Manos del Uruguay. And it... what is the name of that yarn? I think it's called Acero. And it's very, very similar. It's a darker gray, some white, and these little highlights of bright blue. It's a much loftier yarn, really like poofy. And I made a really nice shawl out of it, and I sold it, and I've regretted it since, and then I haven't remade it. But when I saw this one, it reminded me of that yarn, and I just really like that color combination. This is a much more muted version of that. The gray is lighter. The white has just a little bit of a touch of blue to it, and then there's these little highlights of kind of a baby blue in here that I really like. So I don't know what I'm gonna do with this, but I'm definitely not gonna sell it this time. This is just really, really, I don't know. I really like it. So that is Milky Way. And then this one I sort of bought on a whim. This one is called Curry On. I was very close to the shipping cutoff, and this one I kind of went back for and kind of picked something a little bit out of the normal for me. So this one's also the 75-25 blend, 4-ply, 100 grams, 463 yards. And it is a gold and like, I don't know, dark brown mix with chunks of rainbow in here. So the yarn that Sock Obsession Yarns is like most popular or most known for is their Bioluminescence and Fairy Witchcraft colorways, which are these bright purple and bright like teal with these rainbow chunks in them. And so this one still has the rainbow chunks, but is a very different base. I don't know if I have the purple around anywhere. I might be able to scrounge up the bioluminescence, but Really, really neat. So what happens when you work this up is each one of these strands, as you're working along, you'll be working copper and gold all the way down the yarn, and then you'll hit a rainbow patch. And this is like 2 stitches of a rainbow. And then you'll keep working and you'll get to the next rainbow patch and you'll get like 2 little stitches. But what happens is if you're working in the round, all of the little rainbow sections will all stack up on top of each other. Um, and you'll get these like blips of color throughout the pattern. If you don't work it in the round or you work it slightly differently, it will be more like confetti or funfetti looking. And so that's a little bit different looks that you can get out of this yarn. Um, but I'm pretty excited to work with this actually. I don't actually know how it's going to look because the rainbow is so different than the what do you call this? I guess copper gold color here. Brass? Swamp? Kind of a brass color, I guess I would call it. Um but yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it. Uh, Honestly, I like all of these even more than I did online. Looking at the pictures, the photography on there seems to have been very accurate, but like I feel like the color, I'm not blindsided by anything here. So, let's see. Val said that's the best yet. I think it's about one of the blue ones up here. Not sure which one. But a handful of people really liking all of the different colors that I've got. Stephanie loved the gray yarn. All right, Val has a question. She's got quite a few hanks. Can I recommend a good winder? What I would recommend if you don't already have it is first get a Swift. You can ball it by hand, you can ball it with a cheap winder, but definitely have a Swift if you're going to try and ball up a hank of yarn. So a Swift can be a flat sort of cross that spins around on the table, or it can be a thing that pops open like an umbrella. It doesn't have to be expensive. I have like an $11 Swift somewhere. Actually, I don't have any idea where my Swift or my winder are at. They're not. Oh, there's my winder.
That's the expensive one, right?
Yep. Here's the Swift. So this is a Swift. I've had this one for probably 6 or 7 years now. And you just put the hank on here and you open it up and it holds it from collapsing and tangling as you wind off the yarn. So if I had to choose between the two, I would tell you to get a Swift first and hand ball it before I would say get a yarn baller and try and figure out how to hold the yarn still. This is the winder that I have. This is from Stanwood. It's on the pricey side. Somewhere in the ballpark of like $75. It's not necessary to go this expensive. I wanted this one. It was a gift. I used a like $14 Amazon one from like a company called House Sweetie or something. Very generic and plastic. It worked just fine. It wasn't amazing. The yarn did it. The cone here was quite a bit shorter, and the yarn had a tendency to jump off if the ball got too big. This one works beautifully. It makes perfect yarn cakes, but it is expensive. There are some medium priced ones on there that are this style where you've got an arm that rotates around and these exposed gears. I haven't tried them. I don't have any experience with them, but they're closer to like the $35 range. But like I said, I would make sure you have a Swift first, and then any price range will get you something that's usable. But in this case, a more expensive yarn baller might give you a more consistent and slightly better product. The one of the other advantages with this one over like the $14 version is the amount of yarn you can get on there. So not only is this part taller, so you can make kind of a taller, bigger ball, but you can comfortably go till your yarn is this big around. And so you can probably get like half a pound of yarn on here. I think this is an 8-ounce winder. So you can get half a pound or so of yarn on here on a small, like the $14. There's a very, like, if you go on Amazon and you look for yarn winders, there's going to be one model that shows up. It's going to be tan with like a red base, and it's sold under like 50 different brands. They must all just come from like one factory, and they just sell them under a bunch of names. But that one will give you a perfectly fine ball of yarn, but they'll be more this size, so they're a little bit short. And then sometimes, like I said, sometimes you'll get like one yarn that'll jump over, and you'll get like these lines on the top that are just not quite perfect, but they do the job, and they still work pretty well. So
minimum really would be an $11 winder for Swift.
yeah. So basically, to get started with using a yarn like this in a hank, it's going to cost you about one hank of yarn's value. So generally, sock yarns, hand-dyed yarns like these are in the $25 range. It's going to cost you about $25 to get started in that area. So an $11 an $11 Swift and like a $14 winder will get you what you need to work with. Obviously, you can spend more on both of those things. Stephanie said that she uses the cheaper winder without a Swift. It works, but it's difficult. Just got a Swift. I know most people go that way, and a lot of people end up getting winders just to rewind just yarn that you could use as is. So if you just go to Joann Fabric and buy a ball or a skein of yarn, you can use that as it is. A lot of people prefer to cake it up. And so in a lot of cases, most people end up with a winder first. If you've already bought hanks of yarn, though, you really will save yourself a lot of hassle owning a Swift. Even if you don't already own a winder, I would get the Swift first, personally. However, if you're looking just to wind yarn into cakes and you're redoing skeins of yarn from the store, you don't need the Swift. The only thing that the Swift helps with are these big loops of yarn, which we call hanks. So the issue here is that you have to hold it in this ring like this while you wind it up. So you either have to get somebody to hold it, and I know that sounds like it wouldn't be that hard, but it doesn't really go in a circle the way you'd think. I don't really know how to explain it, but the yarn sometimes it'll start on the top and then it'll like dip underneath and crisscross. And so as you're wrapping the ball, it's not that difficult. But if you're using a winder, you can't pass the winder through the hank, really. And so what you end up doing is somebody will take their hand, like if you're having somebody hold the yarn, they'll take their hand out to try and assist it, and the whole thing will just like fall apart, and it goes bad so quickly. So I've seen people use the backs of computer chairs. You can rig up hangers in, like, if you put 4 hangers in sort of like a cross shape, you can set the yarn on there and kind of work your way around the outside. But for $11 or $12 or something like that on Amazon, you could just get a Swift and just not have to fight with all of the viable but difficult to use options. Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question. Stanwood would be my favorite choice, but you can get by just fine with any number of the cheaper options on Amazon. They just have a reputation for making a very nice product. Knitpicks makes a couple of different winders and a couple of different Swifts. They're probably all fine. The only ones that I would know that don't have a very good reputation are the electric. I think Singer makes them, maybe. But somebody makes a totally horizontal ball winder that rotates on its own, and that has a pretty universally terrible reputation. Um, what's that?
One of the viewers has one. I remember.
Oh, one of the viewers has one that they didn't like either.
I remember in a previous stream
Yeah.
you mentioned it.
So it basically sits totally horizontal like this and just rotates. And I don't remember if it doesn't really have any way to traverse back and forth, or it's not good. Is all I remember. I've heard that from a number of different people. I don't even know if they make them anymore. They might have just discontinued them, and whatever's out there is out there on the used market. But don't I would say don't waste your time on that. So hopefully you find one that you like. Let us know too if you end up ordering one of those medium priced ones from Amazon, like the $35 one. I'm curious to see how it works for somebody. All right. Tracy is asking, what type of stitch would I suggest using when I want to highlight my yarn as opposed to the stitch? I plan to make a wrap or poncho with a really unique variegated lock spun yarn. Yeah. Yeah, I've got a handful of shawls here. Yeah. Yep, I'm just pulling a couple of variegated yarns out, so you can see how different ones work up differently. So depending on what kind of variegations you have, this one is a yarn that was very consistently gray with a lot of splotches of color. And this is a pretty open, lacy shawl. Oh, hold on. Let me back up so we can switch cameras. I've got the shawl too far out. But this is what I would call a variegated yarn, truly variegated, where it's just all kind of a mishmash. You don't see really any patterning happening. It's not really speckled. You've got sections that are several stitches long. So, in some sections in here, you can see that there's a patch of gray, a patch of blue, a patch of pink, and it all just melds very nicely together. Now, this is a pretty muted variegation. The colors aren't like wildly different from each other. But this yarn looked very consistent when it was hanked up. And so this particular one is a lacy kind of open stitch would be fine. It probably would have looked very nice solid. So you could have done more single crochet, more double crochet, very, very basic stitches. But this one, I went with a lacy stitch. It's not a super intricate pattern. Just kind of general chains and open spaces. The edges got little scallops on it that are pretty consistent. You can kind of get a feel for what it would have looked like if I had done a more solid shawl on the edge portions of the shawl. So this is one option. You can do something kind of lacy and just let the colors sort of play. what you have to be careful of is depending on how the yarns are dyed, you don't necessarily want to do what I did with this shawl. I very rarely wear this shawl because it turned out very weird. This is a yarn that looked gorgeous when it was hanked up. It was mostly purple and it had this big streak of blue on the end. And what happened is the blue pooled really oddly, and I ended up with this like 90s laser lightning pants. There's a very specific like thing that I can picture in my head. Um yeah, Zubaz pants. Like it because let me see if I've got a yarn that I can show why this happened. This yarn's an example of why this happened. So if you picture this yarn, we're gonna switch back on cameras. If you picture this yarn, you've got a chunk right here of purple, and then a chunk of gold, and a chunk of blue. And what's going to happen is as I work this pattern or this yarn into a pattern, all of the stitches in a row are going to be, you're going to have purple, 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 purple all the way until you hit gold. And so you'll have a chunk of purple, a chunk of gold, a chunk of blue. And what will happen is they'll pool on top of each other. So unless you can get them to pool very, very nicely and very consistently in something like a cowl or something that has consistent width like a scarf, you're going to end up with the colors shifting and you're going to end up with these weird pooled sections like this. This had a similar dye pattern. It was all of this was bright purple and these ends were bright blue, and it looked really cool because when it was hanked up, the blue laid together, and so you had this purple. So this was all purple, and you had this chunk of blue down here, and it looked super, super awesome. But when it actually works up, you end up with this pooling. And if I'd chosen a better pattern for this yarn, it would not have been nearly this in your face about the color changes. So it, depending on what you mean by variegated, because this yarn is something people would call variegated. It's not really. This is more of just a like two-tone or a different color. But people use terms interchangeably, and so I would not do something if you have a yarn like this where it's dyed one color on one side. I would not do a very, very solid pattern. I would tend towards something open and lacy where your stitches are going to kind of spread out a little more chaotically. Yeah, yeah. So what my husband was saying is you have to think about how much yarn you're going to burn per section. So because the other thing with this pattern is that the sections are very short, and relatively consistent. It's really not growing a whole lot over the course of the shawl. So you've got, this one was worked from the corner, and it gets thicker as it goes, but there's a section in here where you're adding stitches to this side and you're taking them off of this side. And so you have this section in here where it's very consistent and you're working pretty short rows back and forth, and they start to like lay on top of each other really and pool really tightly. If this had been a triangle that worked from the the point and got bigger as it went, the burn rate would basically change every time. So you'd have a little triangle that you were working back and forth, and then it would be getting bigger and bigger, and you'd be going through more yarn on each row. And so it would start pooling very differently. If you work it in the round, it would also pool differently. So there's a number of different things. And this really isn't bad necessarily. I think it's really that it's coupled with the really bright, crazy colors. I also don't like how the pooling changes. So you can see, if I hold this up, you can see there's a section where you've got like zigzags, and then there's a really short, like variegated section down here where it's really back and forth. very quickly. And it's just a lot of look. Yeah. Yeah. And then, so this is a speckled yarn. I just wanted to show this. This is actually a speckled gradient, which is a little bit different. But this I would truly call a speckled yarn, even down here where they're pretty intense. And so again, you're really trying to show off the yarn without causing mayhem. And this again, I went with a more open look, because if you collapse all these on top of each other, you sort of lose some of the speckling, and you'll end up with weird splotches in a lot of cases. So you just have to be careful about matching the pattern to the yarn. One of the things, so what I would say when you're trying to highlight a yarn over a pattern is choose something that has simple stitches. So you don't want cables, you don't want puff stitches, you don't want really like intricate patterns like a basket weave or something like that. Simple shells, very simple lacy look, uh kind of repeating triangles is kind of a nice generalized look. So this is real small lace, you can see, but like each little section just kind of makes like a little triangle. It just kind of goes up and down, up and down. There's just a couple little chain stitches in here. There's tons and tons of patterns that work up like this. This one happens to be a Rachel Nguyen Designs pattern, that I think is called Color Me Crazy. But you can see there's little V stitches in here and lots of just little chains. Very, very simple. Alternatively, you can just work up like a very simple single or double crochet cowl, which will really just highlight the yarn, and it'll be very, very simple and just kind of show off the yarn more than anything. Let's see. Val thinks the blue blend looks like a tweed and isn't that bad. Marquita said the drape is very pretty on the shawls. And Tracy said the yarn is more variegated than chunky as far as colors. Mostly cream with dark purples and blues throughout. So probably something a bit more like this. But sounds like a heavier weight. But where the colors are more consistently variegated, and you've got all of the colors kind of swirling as you work it around in a circle. And with a yarn that's truly more variegated, it's a lot easier to be more flexible on patterns. Because it's less likely that the colors will pool weirdly. It's really when you end up with chunk of color that you end up, as you go around the yarn, you'll notice that weird things happen. Yeah, the simple stitches are really what highlight a yarn instead of a pattern. So this,
Didn't we like make some big mistake where we had one that had like a really fancy pattern that looked crazy because it was
um I don't know. I'm trying to think. My husband's wondering if there was a pattern that I worked up that the yarn was too variegated and kind of lost the whole pattern. Um there's been a handful of patterns where I really liked the yarn and I really liked the pattern, but the combination of the two was a really poor choice. Um let's see. Tracy said it also has curly locks throughout. The hank and open lacy pattern should show off the locks. I agree. I think an open lacy pattern is probably what you want. And just don't go too crazy with the lace. Very simple repeating small lace sections, I think, is where I would go with that. I wouldn't be going after like a pineapple lace where the detailing is really intricate. Just really, really simple open lace. Catcraft said, I made a shawl using urban chic yarn. It was coming out nicely, and then I added a second skein, and when it was completed, then noticed that the front pattern out with thick stripes, and doesn't know what she's gonna do with it. Um, yeah, I mean, that does happen. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot to be done about it in the end. If you notice that you're getting pooling in like during the pattern, you can disrupt it. So you can add or lessen your tension, like higher tension, lower tension, make your stitch length just a little bit different. And sometimes you can disrupt the pooling. Sometimes you can just stop, cut your yarn, move a section out of the way, and restart. And you can just kind of interrupt the flow. You get pooling, and people do this intentionally by making all of your repeats exactly the same size over and over and over again. And so you'll find these yarns that if you can get exactly 3 stitches out of this color and exactly 3 stitches out of this color and exactly 3 stitches out of this color, and you can get it on a cadence where every time you go to repeat, you're always making your stitches the same size, you can get the colors to pool really, really cool. But if you change your tension just a little bit, if you change just a little bit about it, it all goes away. And you'll see all kinds of like failed planned pooling, where it'll all look perfect, and then you get to a little section and something went wrong, or they clearly changed like balls of yarn and they didn't quite get the color change in exactly the right spot. And so that happens. Um, I don't unfortunately have a really good suggestion on how to fix that other than to pull it out and do it again, which doesn't really sound like a viable option now that it's complete. Um, what I do find is more often than not people don't actually notice, but that wouldn't actually be of much comfort to me. Like I probably would be upset with it too. But more often than not, people don't actually notice things like that. And paired with the right, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was a shawl, with 2 panels. It sounds like, paired with the right like way to wear it. It it might not actually be that big of a deal. So if it's a shawl that you had originally intended to say drape like this and wear it like this, sometimes it's just as simple as taking it and wearing it this way instead. So you might be able to just style it differently and hide it a little bit, or lay it just a slightly different way and you won't see the stripes so much. But you could send me a picture and I can take a look and see if I have any better suggestions after seeing the actual item. You can send it to me on Instagram or on Facebook at Experiments in Crafting, and I can see if I can make any recommendations. But in order to fix stripes, really all you can do is pull them back out and rework them, or do your best to obscure them. If it's somewhere that you could put a shawl pin or a flower or something that kind of interrupts like your eye from seeing the blocky stripes, that might also help. When I wear this shawl, so this shawl is intended to wear this point in the back right between your shoulder blades and then have this part wrapped around the front. I don't wear it like that because it really draws this pattern out, because you wear it real flat. I wear this shawl like this, um, and kind of bunch it, and it looks more like kind of a weird digital camo, but it doesn't highlight all of the chaotic, uh, like pooling in here. It just looks kind of crazy. And I have a couple of tank tops that this looks good with. And like I said, I don't wear it very often because while it's colors that I like, it turns out I don't actually really like wearing colors like that. My colors are much more muted. Like the colors that I wear are much more muted in a lot of cases. Or I get maybe not muted, but like jewel tones. Where this is, I don't know. I don't often wear like crazy bright teal, I don't think. So, as much as I'm drawn to that color, uh, it's not a color that I actually wear all that much. So, let's see. Let's see. The shawl has a definite cape look to it. So, if it sort of needs to be worn as a cape, then I guess I would think about how you can maybe bunch it up a little bit or um, maybe turn it or lay it just slightly different so that it doesn't draw attention to the stripes. But uh, like I said, honestly, I think we're each our own worst critic. And more often than not, most people will not notice things like that. And if they do, generally people are not rude enough to point it out. But um, I think that it would bother me too, and I probably would be hesitant to wear it. But also, you spend a lot of time working on it, and you should wear it and just see how it looks on and styled and give it a try.
What about blocking it really wide open? Does that do anything? Like to try to add more negative space?
Yeah, my husband recommended
I mean, recommend.
or asked if I thought blocking it open and sort of adding a little bit more of air in there. I would probably have to see it in order to know if the pattern would look. Unfortunately, you can take blocking a little bit too far and make it look a little bit stretched, which you wouldn't necessarily want to do. But if there's any laciness to it at all that you can work with, blocking it might actually just fix the problem. Even if it doesn't need to be blocked a ton, if you haven't yet blocked it, I would do that first and see if opening it up kind of interrupts that pattern. That is a good suggestion. That if it hasn't been blocked yet, it might be helpful. If it's a really solid pattern, with a heavy-ish yarn, it might not make a big difference, but it always ends up looking nicer when it's blocked either way. It might just not fix the problem. The only reason I would recommend holding off blocking is if you think you're going to pull it back apart. So if there's any chance that you are actually going to rip back one of the panels and fix it, I would not block it because when you get it in the water and you get those fibers interacting, regardless of what the fiber type is, they uh get harder and harder to pull back apart. So I would, if there's any chance you're going to pull it apart, don't block it. But otherwise, if you think regardless of what happens, you're going to leave it alone, um, definitely give blocking a try. Jane says that sometimes crochet items look different when worn, and that's true. Especially since it's a shawl and it'll be worn over clothing. Like like we were saying, the negative space in there. If you should try it on with a few different colors and a few different things. Um, so if it's maybe like a white t-shirt would show a lot more through the holes and the gaps, and it might interrupt it to the eye. Your eye's really good at picking up patterns, but if you put like a pop in between in all of the spaces, it kind of disrupts it. So if I hold this up, you can see the pattern really well. But if I hold it closer, you know what I mean? Like if I hold it away from myself, it's different than if I hold it close to myself. And if I back it with black versus white, it looks different. So I would just give it a little bit of a chance. Um, and see what happens. All right. I think that's all I've got to share with you guys. If there's more questions, go ahead and throw those in the live chat. I did mention last week that I fixed up the bunny that I was working on, and I was just going to show that real quick. So this was the little bunny ballerina that I was working on, and previously I'd shown this. This was a pretty short little tutu. It only had one ruffle, and I went back and I just made a second ruffle and sewed it in on the dress. And it was actually a little short, and so I had to bunch it kind of weird, but I think it turned out much better. Without having to add anything anywhere else. Just this little extra ruffle made it a little longer, gave it a little bit more like interest going on here. I also added the laces on the ballet slippers down here. Um, and so I'm a lot happier with the pattern with the second ruffle on the dress. Um, and then I do have a second dress, and I added in the little straps on the top there. So those are my two dresses, and this is about ready to be photographed and sent to its new home. Stephanie asked earlier, but not sure if you missed the answer. I have a bunch of sport weight yarn, almost 700 yards. I have no idea what to do with it. Does anyone have suggestions? I did not see that earlier, so I'm sorry about that. 700 yards of sport weight. So sport weight is roughly between a fingering weight and a DK weight. 700 yards is a pretty significant amount, but not probably enough to do like a full sweater. 700 grams is gonna be 700 yards. It's gonna be 200 to 300 grams of yarn ish. Trying to think what I would do with that much sport weight yarn. I mean, two. So you're in a territory where you could do a really large shawl. Olive green. There's some really pretty like Celtic stoles. So if it's a really solid green without a lot of variation to it, there's a book called Contemporary Celtic Crochet. I might have it over here. I don't see it. I might only own that as a digital copy, too. I'm trying to remember. But there's a really beautiful like stole, which is a like rectangular shawl, that has lots of intricate like Celtic cables and stuff. That might be something fun to work on. Is doing something like that. When I have situations like this, I default to going to Ravelry and turning on as much or as little as you like about the yarn. So you could go there and you go to the pattern section, and then when you get to that page, there'll be like categories, and it'll tell you shawl and hat and gloves and all these things. And down at the bottom, there'll be a button that says like search by all or view all categories or something like that. Yeah, that's the book, and that's actually the stole that I'm talking about that she's wrapped in. That has all of these cool cables, and I've never done it, but I really, really want to. It's just such a cool looking pattern. I don't know what size yarn that's intended for, but you could do it in whatever. It would just be thinner. If if it's intended for an Aran weight yarn, it would just be much flatter and much thinner rather than puffy and like warm. It would be more what do I want to say? Delicate and like refined, I guess. I find like if you work a pattern that was supposed to be done in um like a worsted weight and you do it in a very fine weight yarn, um it just looks daintier, I guess. But anyway, you can go to Ravelry, you can go to the pattern section, get into where you are searching by all patterns, and then along the side, you can start clicking boxes that are relevant to your yarn. So there'll be a box for sport weight yarn. There will be a section that will be yardage, and you can choose 0 to like 300, 300 to 450, 500 to 700. And so you can click the the yardage around what you have. I always, when I do this, I always choose a couple of options. So if I have 400 yards of something, I always go like one higher and one lower. Because in a lot of cases, you can fudge it one way or another. You can make something that was intended to be smaller slightly larger, or you can find something that was intended to be large and make it slightly smaller. And so in a lot of those cases, I'll choose a couple of different sizes, but you can narrow it down in size, and then you can start adding categories. So if you're thinking, well, I think I want it to maybe be a poncho or a sweater or a shawl, you can add those in, and then just start looking and see what inspires you. And if you don't see anything on the project or on the pattern pages, you can go to the project pages and do exactly the same thing. But in this case, you'll see everybody's projects. And so you might come across something that is olive green and just looks amazing. And so when I get like that, I use Ravelry's features as heavily as I can. If you go back and look, there are a couple of Ravelry tutorials in my live streams from before. They have since updated their page and like the look to it, but all of the functionality is in roughly the same place and is all roughly still there. And so the features that I talk about in those old live streams should still hold true. If you find something that is no longer true, let me know and I'll make like a little note on the page. But it'll look different, but it should behave similarly.
It does look like in that Celtic crochet one
Mm-hmm.
that most of the stoles and wraps are Aran weight.
Yeah.
So
So what my husband was telling me is that most of the stoles and wraps in the Celtic contemporary Celtic crochet are Aran weight, and that doesn't surprise me because Aran um is the like thing that Ireland is famous for. The Aran weight yarns are uh are Irish. I don't know if those are, if all of the Aran yarns came from Ireland, but when I'm saying Aran, I'm saying Aran, as opposed to Erin, which is also associated with Ireland. Um, but like I have a scarf uh from Ireland, and the name of the company is Aran, Aran, something sweaters or something like that. So that's kind of their thing. So it doesn't surprise me at all that contemporary Celtic crochet uses primarily Aran weights, but the pattern would still work just fine for a sport weight yarn if you just wanted to try out cables. You certainly can find other patterns that will work just fine too. It was more the idea of a large rectangle is really what I was suggesting there. Sort of a solid large rectangle I think would look really nice in a solid neutral color like olive. Kind of an earthy tone. Um So that was more my suggestion. I in my head I had pictured that very natural creamy color that Irish sweaters and scarves and things come in. And I was thinking that would look equally good in a nice olive. So, um, Jane is also suggesting that Hobby has shawl patterns, and most, if not all, are free. So that's a good suggestion as well. Uh, it would I would suspect that most of them would be on Ravelry, and then they would have a link out to the Hobby website, but I could be wrong about that. Not everybody cross posts everything. Um, but I've found like Bernat and Red Heart and everybody, all of their patterns are on their website, but then also cross listed on Ravelry. So that's generally why I suggest that. Is just it's the most comprehensive of the locations to look up patterns. But that doesn't mean that you're going to catch all of them. So, and certainly you can use other things. You can use Etsy. You can use Pinterest. I just find the Ravelry is more targeted towards um getting down in the weeds and trying to find exactly the right project that matches the exact yardage and and style that you were hoping to find. So, but definitely a good suggestion, and especially because a lot of the patterns are free, makes a good place to look, a good place to start. So, all right. Well, with all of that said, I'm thinking I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up for the evening, unless there's any last minute questions that sneak in here. We generally stream on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. I've not done an amazing job at making that target in the last few weeks, but I'm hoping to get a little bit better at that. Um, Summer is weird because just so much is going on, and this summer in particular has been particularly busy for me, and so hopefully as it gets into fall and winter, less things will be going on, and it'll be much easier to hit those Tuesday night streams. Thank you all for all of the questions and chat back and forth with me. Like I've said in the past, you guys commenting and talking in the live chat really help move the stream along and make it really fun for me to do this. Um, I I really appreciate you guys all watching and kind of chatting with me, and um it's fun to buy yarn and show you guys, but really what I like to do is chat and sort of offer some advice when I can and talk about yarns and whatnot. So I appreciate it and hope you will join me again next week. Like I said, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Central is generally when we stream. If you have questions for me, or you want to share projects, or you want to share projects with each other, you can find me on Facebook at Experiments in Crafting, or Instagram at Experiments in Crafting. And if you find me on Facebook, there's also a Facebook group that you can share with each other. And I think Stephanie posted this morning. I need to respond some kind of fun things with the group that she's been working on. So please, others have posted in there before. Please continue to post in there and chat with each other as well as with me. So thank you very much, and you're getting a handful of thank yous as well. And we will see you next week. Have a great rest of your week, and have a great weekend. Bye.